morning, everyone, and welcome into Wake Take. It's your boy Jason, and we've got some football to talk about today. Scrap Iron called it. I actually did have to feed the birds. He was being kind of annoying. I had to figure that out, but we're good now. Only 6 minutes late. Who cares, right? 10:06, 10 o'clock, it doesn't really matter. We're still going to talk football. I'm still here. Y'all are still here. It's still going to be good. And we've got some fun stories to talk about today. Free agency has slowed down a tiny bit as Monday was just ridiculous. So we talked about some of the bigger ones on Tuesday, saved a couple to talk about today. And then also we're going to have some other fun stuff to talk about today. And I'm very excited to get to our last story of the show. So make sure you stick around. It's a good one, really big story. Very excited to break the news here on this show, on this episode. And Talkin' Sunday, thanks. My hair does look better today. The water was turned back on. It took 25 hours. It went out 4 o'clock on Monday. It came back on at 5 p.m. yesterday. The plumber took all his time. He really wanted that full day's pay. And he got it. That man made some money yesterday, I am sure. But either way, we're back. I'm excited to talk football. Let's go ahead and get right on into it. Oh, yeah, and drink your coffee. The coffee's back, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be awesome. I am so excited to have water again. You have no idea. Absolutely no idea how exciting it is to have water again. But let's talk football. Let's talk some football. Feeling good this morning, guys. I don't know why I'm feeling so good this morning. Let's go. Derrick Henry, Baltimore Raven. Woo! We've been expecting this one, since last year? That was a regular season thing before the trade deadline. We were like, Derrick Henry's running to the Ravens. It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. And now it's finally happening. It was supposed to happen at the trade deadline. Apparently, they couldn't quite agree to the terms or whatever to get the trade done. But now that he's a free agent, he's joining the Ravens, and it should be special. I'm pretty excited about it. Now, of course, things are going to be a little bit different for Derrick Henry. This is not going to be Derrick Henry getting 30 carries a game, and don't expect it to be. This is going to be Derrick Henry getting 15 to 20 carries a game, if even that. They are using Derrick Henry to be a power running back. He's 30 years old, and yes, he can still handle a massive workload, but we're still talking about the Ravens, and we're still talking about Lamar Jackson. That guy needs to carry the ball a lot, and that's just a huge part of the offense is kind of alternating between the running back and Lamar Jackson. Will Derrick Henry still be a bell cow? Yes, especially with J.K. Dobbins still a free agent, Keaton Mitchell recovering from his injury, Gus Edwards going to the Chargers. I mean, the king is going to be king in Baltimore, but will he get double-digit touchdowns? That's the big question. Last year was a down year for Derrick Henry, and I'm putting quotes around it because it was a pretty damn good football season, just not quite there for the fantasy football points department, at least on a consistent basis. He would have some ceiling games and then some floor games, and it was quite, it was a little frustrating to manage as fantasy football people, as players. But he still finished the NFL last year, number 1 with carries, the second most rush yards, the second most breakaway runs, and the 6th most touchdowns with 12 last year. So he's still a really, really good running back at 30 years old. And I think with the Ravens, he'll be able to do a lot with little. And still be pretty solid. I don't think he's really going to crack the top 10 running backs this year, but he should still be a top 15 option pretty easily. And at the very least, he's not falling outside of RB2 land. Even with an injury, I think Derrick Henry is still going to be a stud next year. I am very curious to see how he's used when it comes to the red zone, when it comes to the touchdowns. That's going to kind of be my main concern. And also how many carries can he get? I mean, again, Derrick Henry's kind of big thing that made him so good was the dude could get 35 carries and just continuously break down defenses and then explode halfway through the third quarter and especially the fourth quarter when everyone's just tired of tackling this giant of a human. That's not going to be the case in Baltimore. I really don't expect it to be. But he's still a really good running back, probably the best running back in the league just in terms of pure running backness. And so I'm excited about it. I'm also cautiously pessimistic about it in the same vein. I think it's going to be good, but not as great as some are expecting from this. I've seen a lot of people saying Derrick Henry's going to go from a king to a god in Baltimore, and I'm not that quite optimistic about it. Again, I'm still someone that sees the ceiling being limited a little bit by mobile quarterbacks. Yes, it opens up the field a bit, which is why I think that Derrick Henry will be able to do a lot with a little. I just, again, don't think he's going to really grind down defenses in the way that he did in Tennessee. It's a different offense, a different quarterback, and he's going to be used differently. but still well, and still scores fantasy points, and still be really good, still probably get 1,000 yards, and still probably get around 10 touchdowns. I think that that's probably fair to expect. I don't know how much of a ceiling is going to happen here. I think this is going to be more of just a good landing spot for all sides, and not really crack that top 10 of running backs next year. Because I also do think that the Ravens will probably bring in another running back, whether it's re-sign J.K. Dobbins or draft someone in the draft, just because Derrick Henry is 30 years old and only 1 year removed from a broken foot. So that's something to be cautious about, but I don't think he is going to, like, if they do bring in J.K. Dobbins back, which I don't think so at this point, even if they do bring in a running back in the draft, they're not going to take any reasonable volume from Derrick Henry. He's still going to be king. He's still going to be the lead running back, and he's still probably going to see at least 70% of the opportunities. It's just that Lamar Jackson is going to take some stuff away in terms of the classic Derrick Henry usage, but he will still get really good usage as compared to the rest of the league. It's just a different dichotomy when you talk about a running back like Derrick Henry, but still going to be really good. Still very exciting. And I would probably go spend a second to get Derrick Henry. I think a second is right around there. I don't know about a first, and I think a third is too little. I think we should still respect this guy in Dynasty. I know he's 30 years old and a running back, but he took a few years to truly break out. He's now going to an offense to where he's not going to have to carry a massive workload. He's still going to have to carry a big workload, but not the workload that he used to carry. Like, I would be shocked if Derrick Henry leads the league in carries next year. I would be shocked. Will he still get like 200? Yeah, probably. But either way, that's kind of my thoughts here. Apparently, I'm talking too fast on 1.5 times speed and 4,500 milligrams of caffeine. I didn't have coffee yesterday, guys. I had no coffee yesterday. So I have it again. I got to shower. I'm feeling good, and I've got a story again at the back of the show that I'm very excited to talk about. So either way, this is good. Derrick Henry, and apparently I'm talking too fast. So we'll slow it down. We'll slow it down. We'll bring it down an octave as we talk about Deontay Johnson being traded to the Carolina Panthers. Deontay Johnson and a 7th round pick is being sent to the Carolina Panthers for Dante Jackson, the cornerback, and a 6th round pick. What do you think about that? Well, I think that that's a solid package to get, and I think it's a fun little trade. I don't know why the picks were really involved here, but that's okay. I think that you do this little pick swap just to make the trade happen. And the Carolina Panthers, they really do need a wide receiver. Now, Deontay Johnson is one of those wide receivers that I've just never been able to get behind. I think that Deontay Johnson is the epitome of good, not great. And that's fine, really. But I'm going back to my normal voice. I really hope that this is not all that the Carolina Panthers do. If Bryce Young is set back out there next year with Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, Jonathan Mingo as his wide receiver core, I don't think that's much of a step up from what he had last year. I think DJ Chark is I know they're different wide receivers, but I think he brings kind of the same amount of ceiling to the offense that Deontay Johnson does. And so I'm not like crazy excited about this move, but I do think it's good. I just think that the Panthers still need to bring in one more guy. I think if you're talking about Adam Thielen, Deontay Johnson, Jonathan Mingo, and we'll just throw Brendan Rice in there, that's a solid wide receiver core. But you need someone who could at least kind of be an alpha. And Deontay Johnson is not that. He's a good number 2 wide receiver, a really good number 3 wide receiver. And he can get some separation and all that stuff. It's just he's never like truly flashed, never shown much of a ceiling. He only has 1 year with 1,000 yards. But despite only having 1,000 yards once in his career, he still has averaged about 10 points per game, 9.8 being his lowest. And that was his rookie season. So, I mean, he's always kind of hit that double-digit points per game benchmark that I like to use personally. If you're getting me 10 points, I'm not upset with you. I'm just also not that excited. And so Deontay Johnson, I think he's going to be a guy that, you could flex every once in a while. And depending on if the Panthers bring in someone else, you might actually be excited about him on your roster. But I really hope that this is not all that the Panthers are doing. I really hope that they bring in one more wide receiver, maybe in the draft, or still like try to trade for another, because they didn't have to give up too much here. Again, it was really just their cornerback and then a 7th round pick. And Deontay Johnson, he's only 27 years old. He's shown some promise. And outside of his 1,000-yard season, that was like his last year with a good quarterback. So it's possible that he could bounce back, get another 1,000-yard season. I think that would be good. OG says that Calvin Ridley, Deontay Johnson-Mingo, that would be good. I do think that Calvin Ridley is certainly in the cards for the Carolina Panthers, and I like that. I just really hope Deontay Johnson isn't where they end the wide receiver search, because we've been hearing forever that the Carolina Panthers are heavily involved in the wide receiver market. And if Deontay Johnson was that guy, that's a big issue. And that's just not enough to help Bryce Young. That's not enough to help this offense take that next step. But is he good? Sure. Is he great? No, not even a little bit, not even slightly great. He's just a good wide receiver. and yeah, so we'll see what happens there. Again, I really hope that they bring someone else in. I think they will. And then as someone points out in the chat, the Steelers are probably going to draft a wide receiver, and Pickens could kill it this year. I want to say this while we're on the topic of the Steelers, and you guys know me. You know this. You've tuned into Trade Gods. You've tuned into Wake and Take. You've been reading my articles. You've been watching my tweets. I love George Pickens, and I've always loved George Pickens since his rookie year, since his time in UGA. I am very cautiously optimistic about this, guys. Have we really not learned our lesson? Have we really not learned our lesson from Drake London? This is still an Arthur Smith offense we're talking about, guys. And the quarterback is Russell Wilson, who couldn't get Jerry Jeudy the ball, who barely made Cortland Sutton relevant. I can't get excited. I'm having a hard time getting excited about a wide receiver that I love. And for some reason, the general public is really starting to get on board George Pickens. People who were never in on George Pickens is liking George Pickens now, and that scares me. I'm a guy who is a market person. And when I see things starting to get bubbled up, especially players that I care about and like, beyond where I think that they should be valued, that's a red flag to me. I'm not going to lie. I think George Pickens is a fantastic wide receiver. I think he's a great wide receiver. And I think he's probably still going to outperform his ADP. But I think a lot of people are expecting him to take that jump into wide receiver 2, potentially even wide receiver 1 land. I don't see it on an Arthur Smith offense. I really, really don't, especially with Russell Wilson as the quarterback. I think we could see 1,000 yards from George Pickens. I think we could see 6 touchdowns, and that's fine. But that's not really what this hype is saying about George Pickens. So I'm not going to lie. If you can get a first-round pick for George Pickens right now, I'm doing it. I would be moving on from Pickens, because we actually saw it last year when Deontay Johnson and Pat Freiermuth was hurt. George Pickens actually didn't flash. He was actually struggling when he was the number 1 wide receiver, when he was the only wide receiver out there. And we already know from Arthur Smith's time in Atlanta that just because you're the number 1 wide receiver, it doesn't mean you're that good for fantasy. They're not schemed well. And for some reason, we're going to see Calvin Austin score a touchdown before George Pickens does. And so that's why I'm a bit concerned about George Pickens. I'm a bit concerned about the Steelers offense. I think they'll be fine, and I think it'll be okay. But I don't think that there's much ceiling for George Pickens, especially now that Deontay Johnson is gone. I would probably go ahead and move on from him. And again, I have been defending George Pickens for a very, very long time. I still love George Pickens. I roster him in the Trade Gods League. In fact, I roster a ton of Steelers because last year I thought that would be a good offense to invest in. I was wrong. And I'm not making that mistake again this year, especially with an offensive coordinator that we've all come to hate in the fantasy football community. I don't want to do it. I think it's risky, and I don't think we've learned our lesson as a fantasy football community. But either way, that's my take on Deontay Johnson leaving the Steelers. I don't think it's as good for George Pickens as some are suggesting, and I don't think it's as good for the Panthers as some are suggesting either. I need to see more going to Carolina before I get excited about Bryce Young, before I get excited about this wide receiver room. Boom. Let's go ahead and move on now to the Raiders, because this is fun. This is one of the ones I wanted to save, especially now that more news has come out. First, we'll talk about Gardner Minshew. Monday, the Raiders went out and signed Gardner Minshew to be their quarterback, and I love it. You guys know me. I love Gardner Minshew for some reason. I love Jimmy Garoppolo for some reason. For some reason, those quarterbacks I like. I don't know why, but I do. And so I am very excited about the Gardner Minshew signing in Las Vegas. I think that we could see Gardner Minshew's best season as a starter this year. It's looking like Devontae Adams is returning. I think Michael Mayer is going to be able to take a step forward. And I think there's going to be another wide receiver added to this team, whether it be the draft or in free agency. So I think that Gardner Minshew is going to be really solid. I'm very excited to see what happens. And I love this Raiders team right now. Again, Antonio Pierce has really fired up this team, really changed this culture. And while they're not winning the division, I'm not going crazy there. I do think that this will be a very fun and competitive team all year. I think Gardner Minshew is a perfect quarterback 2 for your Superflex leagues. Of course, you're probably actually going to want him as your quarterback 3, but I do think you're going to be able to start him very frequently. I mean, he's in the AFC West, so he's going against the Chiefs twice a year. He's going against the Chargers twice a year. And then he'll have a fun, easy matchup against the Broncos twice a year, on top of just, whatever else they play. So I think that Gardner Minshew is an excellent fantasy football value this season. I would be trading for him in Dynasty. I would be drafting him in Best Ball, Superflex leagues. I mean, you know how easy it is going to be? Think about this, guys. You know how easy it is to build a Davante Adams, Gardner Minshew best ball team, even in single quarterback? I mean, that is really easy to do and would probably be pretty good. I mean, let's be honest here. Davante Adams is going to get a ton of targets, and Gardner Minshew is going to be very happy to have a Davante Adams. So I'm very, very, like, when I was looking at kind of all the signings yesterday or Monday, kind of going through, especially the quarterbacks, I'm more excited about Gardner Minshew to Vegas than I am about Kirk Cousins to Atlanta. And I know that's kind of heresy, but I like it. I like it a lot. I like Gardner Minshew, and I think it's going to be fun. And I think it's going to be really, really good for fantasy, especially when you take into account ADPs and values and all of that. I really think it's a very solid signing by the Raiders. Great for the locker room. Great for Davante Adams. Great for Michael Mayer. Great for Gardner Minshew. It's check marks all around. It's really awesome. I love it. And subsequently, the Raiders have moved on from Hunter Renfrow, which sucks. I love Hunter Renfrow. And I thought if a quarterback could revive Hunter Renfrow, it would be Gardner Minshew. But he is freeing up about $8 million in cap. He hasn't done anything the last couple seasons, so it makes sense to move on from him, as well as Jimmy Garoppolo. With his suspension, all of his guarantees were completely voided, so they're actually not really losing money or gaining any money from this Jimmy Garoppolo thing. They're just moving on from him. So I'm very curious to see where Hunter Renfrow lands. I think that if he goes to a spot with a good quarterback or a good system that uses slot receivers, we could see a resurgence from him, maybe as a wide receiver 3 back to being a good flex player for you. And Jimmy Garoppolo, I know he has a 2-game suspension, but I talked about it yesterday. I think the Vikings could be a very, very interesting landing spot for him. He worked with Kevin O'Connell in San Francisco, if I remember correctly. And with that 2-game suspension and with them paying about $10 million to Sam Darnold, it shows that the Vikings are in on Sam Darnold at least a little bit. And so with Jimmy Garoppolo being suspended for a couple games, that's going to give Sam Darnold a little bit of a leash to see if he has kind of turned over a new leaf and become a good NFL quarterback. And if he hasn't, Jimmy Garoppolo will be a good NFL quarterback, distributing passes to Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson. So that's kind of where my eyes go when I think about a potential landing spot for Jimmy Garoppolo. I think it's going to be somewhere that is okay waiting 2 games on a quarterback, okay taking a risk. And the only one to me that makes sense would be the Vikings, because I don't think that the Broncos makes a lot of sense. I don't think they're going to want to roll out Jarrett Stidham for 2 games or whatever, rookie for 2 games. And I don't think it'd be the Patriots either. It's kind of the same situation. I think it's going to be somewhere that has a quarterback in place, at least for the first couple games of the season, and then would want to be able to pivot if they have to. And that to me screams Minnesota Vikings. So that's my guess in terms of where Jimmy Garoppolo could land. Not sure about Hunter Renfrow. There's just, a lot of teams need wide receivers. It could be anywhere. I hope it's the Chiefs. They still need a slot receiver. But that's just everyone's wish, right? It could be the Bills. He could sign with the Falcons. I mean, he could go anywhere. So I'm not even going to try to guess. But either way, very excited to see where both of those players land, to be honest. I think Jimmy Garoppolo could be a very good value right now. Again, I don't think his story is done, even with this suspension. But I am just also a Jimmy G guy. What would I give up for Minshew in Dynasty? If you can get him, if it's a super flex, I would go as far as a third. In one quarterback, I'm probably just not going to bother unless I own Davante Adams. So yeah, I think that's it. To the House says New Orleans maybe for Jimmy Garoppolo. That's interesting as well. Just kind of sit behind Derek Carr. Yeah, Jimmy Garoppolo is either going to be a backup or somewhere where he's like a quasi starter if necessary. So New Orleans makes sense too. and the Raiders are drafting a quarterback, maybe, but they're going to sit behind Gardner Minshew. For sure. I would almost guarantee it that whatever quarterback they draft is not going to be starting at least immediately next season, which is why I like Gardner Minshew. All right, let's go ahead and move on now to another story. The Texans. This is kind of crazy, as yesterday we talked about him being released, but as we know, today, I think it's like 4 p.m. is when the new league year actually starts. So we actually still have until 4 p.m. for a lot of the stuff we've talked about to actually change. But Joe Mixon was originally reported as released by the Cincinnati Bengals and then instead was traded to the Houston Texans yesterday for a compensatory 7th-round pick. There's no new contract or anything. He's still scheduled to be a free agent at the end of the season. So don't get like too crazy for Joe Mixon in Dynasty. But a good move, a really good move, especially for redraft and contending teams in Dynasty. This is a guy that had a down year last year, again, throwing quotes around it because he still had 1,000 rush yards. He still had double-digit touchdowns. He had 50 receptions. I mean, it was really good usage, just had some down weeks and not quite what people wanted from Joe Mixon. But he's only going to be going into his 28-year-old season. The Texans, we just saw last year, use Devin Singletary greatly. He was scoring points after points after points down the stretch. So I think Joe Mixon's going to be able to do even better than Devin Singletary did. My only concern here, I mentioned that he is scheduled to be a free agent at the end of the year. I think the Texans are positioned perfectly to draft a running back, and I think they will. Now, I don't think that whatever running back they draft is going to significantly push Joe Mixon to start the year, but I wouldn't be surprised if towards the end of the year, the running back that they've drafted has worked this into some sort of split to where he will be the main running back in 2025. So just kind of keep track on that. I do think the Texans will be drafting a multifaceted running back, whether it be a Marshawn Lloyd or someone else in the draft. I think that we will see a running back get drafted to the Texans that will push Joe Mixon a little bit for snaps, maybe not at the beginning of the year, but surely time by the end of the season, because the Texans definitely do want a franchise running back. That's why they were in on Saquon, didn't get him. And then that's why they eventually traded for Joe Mixon. They want a good running back. They will get one in the draft. There's a ton of them. So I'm very excited to see who they inevitably end up drafting. And I'm not going to get out over my skis on Joe Mixon here. I'm not going to reach for him in any best ball drafts or anything. But if he falls to me, I'll take the chance and just see what happens. Again, Devin Singletary was scoring 20 points after 20 points after 20-point games last year. I think Joe Mixon can do a lot of the same. And I'm very excited. Again, I was super ecstatic about Saquon Barkley potentially going to the Texans. I think that it's a great landing spot for a pass-catching, multi-purpose running back. That screams Joe Mixon. I think it will be special while he's the main guy. But again, just urge caution. This is just a contract that's expiring at the end of the season. I would be shocked if the Texans don't try to figure out a contingency plan for 2025 and beyond in the draft this year. Which moves us to Darnell Mooney. We'll talk Darnell Mooney, a little Mooney action. This is going to be a lot of my same thoughts, kind of with Deontay Johnson. The Falcons are bringing in Darnell Mooney for a 3-year, $39 million contract. $26 million of that is guaranteed. And he's just another one of those good, not great wide receivers. I think he'll be solid. He doesn't play a ton in the slot, but still does it. 57% slot snaps last year. So I think that's basically where he's going to be. And if I had to guess, he would probably serve as like a KJ Osborne plus in this Falcons offense. I think it's going to run through Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Bijan. But then sometimes Darnell Mooney is going to have a couple big games to where he's just the open guy and gets the ball. I mean, Kirk Cousins distributes passes. He doesn't just lock on to his first read or even his second read. Darnell Mooney's going to have some games. I think he's a good flex play, but I'm not really going to get out over my skis on this guy. I mean, we've seen him before as a wide receiver 1 even, and just isn't good enough. He's only, again, had like 1,000-yard season, and it was just fine. He's just a fine wide receiver, a good, not great wide receiver. He's a solid number 2, an even better number 3, which is probably what he'll be. It'll probably be Drake London, Kyle Pitts, then Darnell Mooney, maybe Bijan ahead of Mooney even. But he's a good wide receiver. I think it makes sense for the Falcons, especially if he plays in the slot more often than not. And he should definitely have some splash games. It's just going to kind of be hard to see where they're coming from. To the house is closer to Addison than Osborne. I mean, like, yeah, in terms of profile, I just kind of mean like the usage because he had like 57% slot snaps last year. KJ Osborne had about 30% slot snaps. Just kind of going in, being a role-playing wide receiver, really wherever is needed, and then just kind of having some splash games. I don't think he's going to be a true like wide receiver 2 like an Addison. Right. I think that he's going to be kind of just used as not a gadget, but just a role playing wide receiver, used a lot, but not necessarily like the focus. So yeah, I do kind of agree he's closer to Addison in terms of profile. I don't like to look at profile comparisons a lot. I know I'm not player profiler here, but I like to think of like potential usage, career trajectory, all that stuff when I think of my comparisons, just because that's easier for me to picture. All right. We'll move on now to Patrick Mahomes, as that is kind of it for free agency and trading. Oh, actually, no, I'll cover Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis, as this was kind of the other one I saved for today. Gabe Davis is signing another 3-year, $39 million contract with the Jacksonville Jaguars. The fact that this is a 3-year contract actually makes me pretty excited. I know a lot of people hate Gabe Davis, but I think that was just the fact he was the wide receiver 2 on the Buffalo Bills, who frequently just locked on to Stephon Diggs or Dalton Kincaid or James Cook, and Gabe Davis was just a boom or bust guy. I think on Jacksonville, this is just me thinking, but I think on Jacksonville, he might lose that boom or bust tag. I think we're going to see a guy with a decent floor on this offense, and I think we'll also still see a lot of his ceiling. Last year, I mean, Calvin Ridley had a good year. He had 136 targets. He had 1,000 yards and he had 8 touchdowns. And with him probably gone, I think Gabe Davis steps into a similar role. So I'm actually kind of excited about Gabe Davis. I'm not going to lie. I think if you could get him for a third, I'd do it. The Trevor Lawrence is going to find him a lot. He doesn't operate in the same area of the field as Christian Kirk or Evan Ingram. And I honestly expect some big spike games from Gabe Davis, and I expect a decent floor. I think that this is a guy that's going to get targeted more than he was in Buffalo. And I think we're going to see his best season yet in Jacksonville. I really, really do. And they're paying him a decent amount. I mean, $40 million over 3 years is a good deal for the Jaguars in terms of this wide receiver market, and a solid deal for Gabe Davis, as he's now locked to a team that will actually use him a lot more. And I kind of like it. I really do like this move. I really do. I think that this is a good one. I think that Gabe Davis on the Jaguars is destined for success. I'm not going to lie. I think we'll see his first 1,000-yard season. I think we'll see at least a couple 20-point games, and I think we're going to see a better floor for Gabe Davis this year. I really, really do. So I'm buying him. I'm really surprised, but I am buying Gabe Davis, which now moves us on to Patrick Mahomes, who is restructuring his contract. He is freeing up $21.6 million in cap. The Chiefs were about $6 million over. So that brings them now to having about $15 million of fun money. Everyone is back, right? I mean, they already got Chris Jones. They've already used their franchise tag on Snead. This is what they have, $15 million. They want a wide receiver, and $15 million is about enough to get one of these fringier free agent wide receivers. So here's a list of some of the bigger ones that I think are within that budget. Marquise Brown, which would probably be on the high end. Calvin Ridley also on the high end. I think that's unlikely. I'm not going to lie, but Calvin Ridley, maybe if they figure out a weird way to make the contract, like maybe it's a 2-year deal, more backloaded. I think that is how they would bring in Calvin Ridley. But Marquise Brown, I think they could easily get for about $15 million, and I think would fit that offense really, really well. And then just some budget options: DJ Chark, Tyler Boyd, Hunter Renfrow, Paris Campbell, if they want to be a team to give him another shot. Those are some guys. I think I'm hoping, it's more of the Calvin Ridley, Marquise Brown route, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see a DJ Chark, Tyler Boyd, Hunter Renfrow, Paris Campbell land in Kansas City. I think if it is one of those lesser wide receivers, then they will still target one in the draft. And I think they'll still probably target a wide receiver in the draft regardless of if they bring one in free agency. That was a huge area of concern, and no one on the roster right now outside of Rice looks like anything worthwhile. So I think that's why they're freeing up the cap. I think they're looking at bringing in a wide receiver in free agency. But no matter what, I mean, it's a great move by Patrick Mahomes, great move by the Chiefs. Freeing up some money is always a good thing, and I'm sure Patrick Mahomes isn't hurting for his millions of dollars. I'm sure he's fine. So it's good. I like it, and I'm very excited to see what wide receiver they bring in with this money and just kind of where they go with it. So that's my thoughts. look for one of Marquise Brown, DJ Chark, Tyler Boyd, Hunter Renfrow, Paris Campbell, and maybe even a Calvin Ridley to land in Kansas City. Which brings us, ladies and gentlemen, to the best story of the show. Saved it for last because it's so exciting. Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel, guys, is changing his number from 19 to 1. But it doesn't just stop there. Deebo Samuel has also added the senior to his name. So this is Deebo Samuel Sr. now, wearing the number 1. Pretty exciting, if you ask me. That is stocks all the way up. We're about to see a career year for Deebo Samuel. He's fired up. He's going to father the rest of the NFL with that senior tag now. Deebo Samuel Sr. has a great ring to it. Wearing the number 1, probably wearing the visor still. That's going to look awesome. I'm excited. Deebo Samuel is already one of my favorite players, if not my favorite player in the league. So much fun to watch. Very excited. Last year under contract too, contract year in San Francisco for him. Has to do well if he wants to stay there or just want to earn some money on the free agency market. Look for Deebo Samuel to feed in 2024. Probably a value right now. I'm excited about Deebo Samuel Sr. That's pretty exciting stuff. That's some pretty good stuff. Deebo. I love him, man. I love Deebo Samuel. I'm excited about this. But that's all I have for you guys. I guess screw it. We still got a few minutes. Why not? Why not? I'll just be really quick. I'm gonna breeze through the rest of the free agents that I haven't really talked about in the last couple. And I'll just say if I think it's good or bad. Gus Edwards to the Chargers. I think that it is good for now, but I still think that the Chargers will be bringing in a running back. Gus Edwards, of course, worked with Greg Roman in Baltimore, so that's a guy that's familiar with the system. Probably going to get some short yardage work. It does make me believe that the Chargers are probably not in for Blake Corum. That's something that I was hoping for, but I think with Gus Edwards, they don't necessarily need a Blake Corum. I think that they would want a more multifaceted running back to go along with Gus Edwards. But I could be wrong, but that's kind of where my head goes. I think that takes him out of the Blake Corum sweepstakes. Devin Singletary to the Giants. Saquon Barkley, super light, if you will. Motor Singletary. I think it's solid, right? I mean, he's still going to catch some passes. The Giants offense is going to be playing from behind a lot. But it's more so we have no idea what they're going to look like next year. I think without Saquon, that the offense is actually going to look okay and more normal, which I think will lead to Singletary at least being usable. But I don't think anyone's very excited about rostering him on the Giants, especially with the news that they've now also brought in Drew Lock to compete with Daniel Jones. That's not very exciting for the pass catchers, for the offense's ceiling as a whole. So ultimately, I would probably stay away from Singletary. But if I do roster him, I would just hold on to him. I don't think I'd sell him. I think his fantasy value is not quite worth the production you'll get from him, which is fine. It's fine, but just not that exciting. Antonio Gibson to the Patriots. This one I still haven't honestly wrapped my head around. I think that I was hoping Antonio Gibson would go somewhere with a more clear role. Obviously, he's a pass-catching running back. I just think that Ramondre Stevenson is also a pass-catching running back and has done a very, very good job with that role. So I'm very curious to just see how they end up splitting that. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they take away a lot of the pass-catching work and give it to Gibson. I just would also not be surprised if Antonio Gibson is still just a backup running back on this team. So this one, I'm just going to kind of take the wait and see approach. I don't think I'm going to be drafting or trading for Antonio Gibson. I just don't trust it. This is a Patriots offense that we don't know who the quarterback's going to be. We already know they're crazy rebuilding. I just don't think I really want a piece of that offense, especially one that's a bit of a question mark. Noah Fant back in Seattle. I guess it's solid, but we've seen them not use him already. I know we're bringing in a new coach, so maybe that changes. But I think we would have seen at least something from Noah Fant by now if we were to get excited about him. So I'm not going to be, going too crazy about Noah Fant. I think I'm more excited, believe it or not, about Colby Parkinson going to the Rams. You guys know this. I've said it a few times. I just have a really good, it's only a gut feeling. Genuinely. I feel Colby Parkinson's success in my stomach. I feel it. I think it's going to happen. And I like the landing spot with the Rams. They use their tight end a lot. Tyler Higbee is unhealthy all the time. And they're paying him a ton of money. It was like 3 years, $30 million or something crazy like that. So I think Colby Parkinson is a success story waiting to happen. It might not be this season. My quote from last season was that I think it might be like 2026 that Colby Parkinson finally breaks out, but I think at some point he will. So if you're in a deeper tight end premium league, I am 100% stashing Colby Parkinson. Which then brings me to where did I didn't even write it down, but where did Will Dissly go, guys? Where did the Chargers? Will Dissly went to the Chargers. Not very excited about that one. I think Will Dissly is just more of a standard tight end. I doubt he gets anywhere near the volume that Gerald Everett did. There's still Donald Parham, if I remember correctly. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Chargers still draft a tight end. But I don't think they're bringing in Will Dissly to be a massive pass catcher. I think they're just bringing him in to be there. And then we have some quarterbacks. Marcus Mariota to the Commanders. Woohoo! And then Jameis Winston to the Browns. Woohoo! I don't know. Jameis Winston out of those, I mean, I feel more of a ceiling. Mariota is just going to be a more of a veteran presence, locker room guy, mentor kind of thing. I could see Jameis Winston taking over for Deshaun Watson by the end of the season. Deshaun Watson has not been good. Jameis Winston is a huge locker room guy, and Jameis Winston will win that locker room from Deshaun Watson by week 1. So everyone on that team is going to be behind Winston. If Deshaun Watson stumbles even a little bit, I would not be surprised if Jameis Winston is starting by like week 6. I know that that's crazy to say. I know that's bold, but that's how I feel. That's how I feel. And I don't think Jameis Winston goes to the Browns if he doesn't feel that as well. I know his quote was that he's there to fix Deshaun Watson, which is hilarious to think about. But I honestly think that Jameis Winston sees a chance that he could actually start and become the quarterback for this team. That's what he wants. We know it. He wants to be a starter. That's all he's ever asked for. And he's shown it. He's demonstrated it. Obviously has the turnover issue, but he's a good starting quarterback. He's a solid starting quarterback. And I think the Browns would do him well. I mean, he basically slings it like Joe Flacco, right? And we saw what that did for that team. So it was pretty exciting stuff. So anyway, those are my thoughts, quick thoughts on the rest of the free agent moves. I might have missed a couple. There was a lot, but those are the ones off the top of my head. Let's go ahead and check in on the chat, see if there are any questions. Let's see. Deebo should change his name to Uno. I love that. But then he loses the senior. So I don't know. I like Deebo Samuel Sr. better than Deebo Uno. Jason, are you going with the guys to the NFL draft? Yes, and I will be boots on the ground. I have a media pass ready for me. I will be there day 1, interviewing rookies like I did last year, figuring out some good sound bites, talking to them, all that fun stuff, getting some pictures. I will be there with a media pass, talking to people at the NFL draft, day 1, day 2, and day 3, I believe. So yes, I will be there. We're very excited about the draft house this year. If you thought last year's draft house was nice, this year's draft house is going to be excellent. We have great news lined up as well for our live draft coverage. We will be working with some other fantastic companies out there to bring better full coverage all draft long. So make sure you tune into that. It's not just going to be Player Profiler. We're going to be rocking with some other people as well. It's going to be special. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button for Player Profiler, especially around draft time. If Deebo added the senior, he added senior. He added senior. Yeah, I guess maybe he named his son Deebo then instead of Tyson. I don't know. I don't get it. He just added senior to his name. So anyway, yeah, that's today's show. I think that's it. No more questions, it looks like. So thank you all so much for tuning in. This was another fun episode of Wake and Take, and you guys were a great audience yet again. I hope to see you all tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern on the Player Profiler, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to hit subscribe to Player Profiler on your way out. You all have a wonderful Wednesday and a terrific rest of your week. Peace.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.